Robert ate cheddar cheese every single day for 30 years. Sandwiches at lunch, cheese and crackers as a snack, cheddar on his eggs for breakfast. I love cheddar, he told everyone. At 70 years old, his PSA was 8.9, rising steadily for 3 years. 7.2, then 8.1, then 8.9. His doctor asked about his diet. Robert described his typical day. Breakfast, eggs with cheddar cheese. Lunch, usually a sandwich with cheddar. Snacks, cheese and crackers. Cheddar, always. His doctor paused. How much cheddar would you estimate per day? Robert thought about it. Maybe 4 to 6 ounces total. His doctor pulled out some research papers. Robert, I need to show you something about aged cheddar and PSA. Research suggests that aged, high-fat cheeses like cheddar contain compounds that may promote inflammation in some individuals, particularly a compound called casein in concentrated form. Combined with high saturated fat content, studies associate aged cheddar with elevated inflammatory markers. Robert was shocked. But cheese is healthy. It's protein and calcium. His doctor nodded. Some cheeses are, but not all cheeses affect your body the same way. Research indicates the aging process in cheddar may concentrate certain compounds that could affect inflammation. The high saturated fat content in aged cheddar specifically may promote inflammatory pathways in susceptible individuals. Research comparing aged cheese consumption to fresh cheese consumption suggests patterns of association with PSA levels. Men who regularly consume aged varieties tend to show higher average PSA than those who primarily eat fresh varieties. The doctor showed Robert a list. 4 cheeses research suggests men with elevated PSA may benefit from limiting, and 4 cheeses research suggests may support prostate health when eaten regularly. There are cheeses you can eat every day, his doctor said. Cheeses that provide protein and calcium without the inflammatory effects. You don't have to give up cheese. You just need to choose the right types. Robert switched from cheddar to the recommended cheeses. After 4 months, his PSA was 8.2, down 0.7. After 8 months, 7.6, 1.3 lower than when he started. I'm eating more cheese now than before, Robert said. But the right cheese? And my PSA is dropping. Robert's response was his individual experience. Your results may differ based on your unique health situation, overall diet, and other factors. The difference wasn't giving up cheese. The difference was knowing which cheeses research suggests may work against PSA goals and which may support healthy levels. Today, I'm revealing the 4 cheeses research suggests men with elevated PSA may benefit from limiting, including aged cheddar and 3 others that may surprise you. And the 4 cheeses you can eat daily that research suggests may actually support prostate health. If you want the complete cheese guide with alternatives and daily serving recommendations, type cheese in the comments right now. Before we start, this video is for educational purposes only, not medical advice. Individual responses to foods vary significantly. Work with your healthcare provider on your complete dietary plan. Let's start with the first cheese men with elevated PSA may want to consider limiting. The one Robert was eating 6 ounces of every single day. Cheese to limit. Number 1, aged cheddar. This includes all varieties of aged cheddar. Sharp cheddar, extra sharp, aged white cheddar. Any cheddar that's been aged for months or years. Robert was eating 4 to 6 ounces daily. That's nearly 3 pounds per week, 12 pounds per month. He didn't realize how much it was accumulating. Here's why aged cheddar may be problematic for PSA. First, the aging process. Cheddar is aged for a minimum of 3 months. Sharp cheddar is aged 6 to 12 months. Extra sharp can be aged 2 years or more. During aging, several things happen. Proteins break down into smaller compounds. Casein, the primary protein in cheese, becomes more concentrated. And research suggests certain casein fragments that form during aging may promote inflammatory responses in susceptible individuals. Second, the fat content. Aged cheddar is approximately 70% fat by calories. Most of that fat is saturated fat. Studies show high saturated fat intake is associated with increased inflammatory markers in some individuals. Inflammation affects PSA levels. Third, the compounds that develop during aging. Aged cheeses may develop higher levels of tyramine, histamine, and other bioactive compounds that research suggests could affect inflammatory pathways in some individuals. Research comparing aged cheese consumption to fresh cheese consumption suggests patterns of association with PSA levels. Men who regularly consume aged cheddar tend to show higher PSA levels than those who primarily eat fresh varieties, though individual responses vary significantly. Another study looked at inflammatory markers. Men consuming aged cheddar regularly showed higher C-reactive protein levels. C-reactive protein is a marker of systemic inflammation. Higher inflammation correlates with higher PSA in many men. Robert's 4 to 6 ounces daily meant his body was constantly processing aged cheddar compounds, creating a chronic inflammatory environment. When he switched to fresh cheeses, that chronic inflammation decreased. His PSA responded accordingly. These research findings represent general patterns. Your response to aged cheddar may differ based on your individual metabolism, gut health, and overall dietary pattern. If you're eating aged cheddar regularly, you may want to consider limiting it or replacing it with fresh alternatives. This doesn't mean you can never eat aged cheddar. Occasional consumption in small amounts is fine for most men. The concern is daily or frequent consumption in large amounts. If you currently eat this cheese daily, consider reducing to once or twice per week, or switching to fresh alternatives most days. Cheese to limit number 2, blue cheese. This includes all blue-veined varieties: Roquefort, Gorgonzola, Stilton, Danish blue. Any cheese with blue or green mold veins running through it. Blue cheese is popular on salads, burgers, and cheese plates. Many men love the strong, tangy flavor. But research suggests blue cheese may be one of the most challenging for men with elevated PSA. Here's why. Blue cheese is made with penicillium mold cultures. These molds create the characteristic blue veins. They also create specific compounds during fermentation that research suggests may affect inflammatory responses in some individuals. Blue cheese is also very high in fat. Approximately 75% of calories come from fat. Most is saturated fat. Combined with the mold compounds, this may create an inflammatory environment for susceptible individuals. Blue cheese is typically aged 3 to 6 months. Some varieties are aged longer. The aging plus the mold fermentation concentrates compounds that research suggests may affect prostate health in some men. Research in this area suggests associations between blue cheese consumption and inflammatory markers. Men who regularly consume blue cheese may show higher levels of certain inflammatory markers compared to those who avoid aged, mold-ripened cheeses. Though individual responses vary, blue cheese is also very salty. High sodium content. Research suggests excess sodium may contribute to inflammation in some individuals. If you enjoy blue cheese, consider it an occasional food rather than regular consumption, perhaps once or twice per month rather than weekly. And when you do eat it, limit portions to 1 ounce or less. Blue cheese as an occasional indulgence, once or twice per month in small portions, is typically fine for most men. The research concerns relate to regular, frequent consumption. Individual responses to blue cheese vary. Some men may tolerate it better than others. Work with your healthcare provider to determine what's appropriate for your situation. Cheese to limit, number 3, aged Swiss. The third cheese research suggests limiting is aged Swiss. This includes traditional Swiss cheese, Emmentaler, and similar varieties. The cheese with the characteristic holes. Swiss cheese is extremely popular on sandwiches, deli sandwiches, burgers, Reuben sandwiches. Many men eat it daily without thinking about it. But research suggests Swiss cheese may contribute to elevated PSA for some men. Here's why Swiss may be problematic. First, Swiss cheese is aged for a minimum of 4 months. Traditional Swiss can be aged for 1 year or more. The longer aging means more concentrated compounds. More breakdown of proteins into fragments that research suggests may affect inflammation. Second, the holes in Swiss cheese. Those holes are created by bacteria that produce carbon dioxide during aging. These bacteria also produce other compounds. Research suggests some of these bacterial metabolites may affect inflammatory responses in susceptible individuals. Third, Swiss cheese is high in saturated fat. About 65% of calories from fat. Studies show this level of saturated fat, consumed regularly, is associated with increased inflammation in some individuals. Research comparing Swiss cheese to fresh alternatives suggests men who consume Swiss cheese daily on sandwiches may show different PSA patterns than those who choose fresh mozzarella or avoid cheese on sandwiches. The cumulative effect matters. Men eating 2 ounces of aged Swiss daily for extended periods may show different PSA trajectories than men eating fresh cheese alternatives, though individual responses vary significantly. If you're eating Swiss cheese on sandwiches daily, you may want to consider switching to fresh mozzarella or eliminating cheese from sandwiches entirely. Add avocado for creaminess instead, or use hummus for flavor and binding. Your sandwich can still be satisfying without Swiss cheese. If you love Swiss cheese on sandwiches, you don't have to eliminate it entirely. Consider alternating Swiss 1 or 2 days per week, fresh mozzarella the other days. This gives you variety while reducing frequent consumption of aged varieties. Dietary changes affect individuals differently. Your response to limiting Swiss cheese may vary. Monitor your PSA with your doctor to see if changes make a difference for you. Cheese to limit number 4. Aged hard cheeses. Gouda, Parmesan, Pecorino. This includes aged Gouda, Parmesan, Pecorino Romano, aged Manchego, and similar varieties. These cheeses are aged for months or years. They're very hard with concentrated flavors, often used for grating over pasta or salads, or served on cheese plates. Research suggests these long-aged, very hard cheeses may be the most challenging for PSA management. Here's why. These cheeses are aged for 6 months to several years. Aged Gouda can be aged for 5 years. Parmigiano Reggiano is aged for 1 to 3 years minimum. Pecorino Romano is aged for 8 months to 1 year. The extended aging means maximum concentration of compounds that research suggests may affect inflammation. The proteins are broken down extensively. The fat content is very high. Parmesan is approximately 75% fat by calories. Aged Gouda can be 80% fat, almost entirely saturated fat. These cheeses also may develop very high levels of tyramine and histamine during aging. Research suggests these compounds may trigger inflammatory responses in susceptible individuals. Research comparing grated Parmesan users to non-users suggests potential associations with inflammatory markers. Men who regularly use Parmesan on pasta may show different inflammatory patterns than those who avoid aged hard cheeses, though individual responses vary. The cumulative amount matters. Even half an ounce daily adds up significantly over months. If you're using Parmesan on pasta regularly, consider reducing frequency or eliminating it. Nutritional yeast provides a similar umami flavor without the aged cheese compounds. If you're eating aged Gouda on cheese plates, choose fresh mozzarella or ricotta instead. These aged hard cheeses are best treated as occasional flavor additions rather than daily staples. A sprinkle of Parmesan occasionally is different from daily heavy use. Consider these as monthly treats rather than weekly or daily habits. Research on aged cheeses and PSA continues to evolve. Individual responses vary based on gut health, overall diet, and metabolic factors. Work with your healthcare provider to determine appropriate choices for your situation. Those are the 4 cheeses research suggests men with elevated PSA may benefit from limiting: aged cheddar, blue cheese, aged Swiss, and aged hard cheeses. Now let me show you the 4 cheeses you can eat daily with confidence, the ones that research suggests may actually support prostate health. Cheese to eat. Number 1, fresh mozzarella. This is the soft, white mozzarella packed in water or whey. not the low-moisture mozzarella used on pizza. Fresh mozzarella is made and consumed fresh. It's not aged. This is critical. Fresh mozzarella doesn't have the concentrated compounds that develop during aging. It's lower in fat than aged cheeses. Approximately 50% of calories from fat versus 70 to 80% in aged varieties. It's higher in protein relative to fat, about 25 grams of protein per 100 grams of cheese. Fresh mozzarella provides protein without extended aging. The fresh form means proteins haven't broken down into potentially inflammatory fragments. Many people find it easier to digest than aged varieties. Research shows fresh mozzarella has different effects on inflammation than aged cheeses. Studies comparing inflammatory markers in men eating fresh mozzarella versus aged cheese show the fresh mozzarella group tends to have lower inflammatory markers. Lower C-reactive protein, lower interleukin-6. Both are markers of systemic inflammation. Research in this area suggests men who regularly consume fresh mozzarella may show different PSA patterns than men who eat aged cheese regularly. Though individual responses vary, fresh mozzarella is versatile. Use it on sandwiches instead of Swiss or cheddar. Add it to salads. Melt it on vegetables. Eat it with tomatoes and basil as a snack. Use it in cooking. Robert switched to fresh mozzarella for most of his cheese consumption. He found he actually preferred the lighter, fresher taste. His PSA dropped 1.3 over 8 months. Fresh mozzarella can typically be included in daily meals for most men managing PSA. As with any food, individual tolerance and appropriate portions matter. Many men managing PSA include 1 to 2 ounces in their daily meals. Your appropriate portion may differ based on your overall calorie needs, protein goals, and dietary pattern. Discuss portions with your healthcare provider or dietitian if you have specific concerns. Individual protein and calorie needs vary. Adjust portions based on your overall dietary needs and goals. Fresh mozzarella is a healthier choice, but portion control still matters. Cheese to eat. Number 2, cottage cheese. Low fat or 2% varieties. Cottage cheese is unique among cheeses. It's fresh, not aged. It's high in protein, low in fat. It's made from curds, which are less processed than solid cheese. Research shows cottage cheese has minimal inflammatory effects. Studies tracking men with elevated PSA who added cottage cheese to their daily diet show patterns suggesting potential benefits. The high protein, low fat profile, and fresh, unaged nature appear favorable for men managing PSA. Cottage cheese is approximately 80% protein by calories, only 15 to 20% fat depending on the variety. This ratio is excellent for men managing PSA. High protein supports overall health. Low fat reduces inflammatory load. The high protein to fat ratio in cottage cheese supports overall nutrition while minimizing saturated fat intake. Cottage cheese is particularly rich in intact protein rather than the fragmented proteins found in aged varieties. Cottage cheese is also rich in selenium. Selenium is a mineral research suggests may support prostate health. One serving of cottage cheese provides about 30% of daily selenium needs. Cottage cheese is extremely versatile. Mix it into scrambled eggs for extra protein. Use it as a base for dips. Top it with fruit for breakfast. Add it to smoothies. Use it in lasagna or stuffed shells instead of ricotta. Eat it plain as a snack. David switched from cheddar on his eggs to cottage cheese mixed into his eggs. Different texture, but he adjusted quickly. His PSA dropped over 1 point in 8 months. Cottage cheese is generally well tolerated for daily consumption by men managing PSA, though individual needs vary. Many men find 4 to 6 ounces per day fits their nutritional needs, though your ideal portion depends on your individual calorie and protein requirements. Work with a healthcare provider or dietitian to determine appropriate portions for your situation. Cottage cheese is a healthy choice for most people, but individual dietary needs vary. If you have specific health conditions or dietary restrictions, consult your healthcare provider about appropriate intake. Cheese to eat. Number 3, ricotta cheese. whole milk or part skim varieties. Ricotta is fresh cheese made from whey. It's not aged. It's creamy and mild. Research suggests ricotta has properties that may support prostate health. Ricotta is high in whey protein. Whey protein is the most easily absorbed protein. Studies show whey protein may have properties that support healthy inflammatory responses. This is different from the case in aged cheeses. The whey protein in ricotta has been studied for its nutritional properties. Unlike aged cheese proteins, the protein in ricotta remains in a form that many people digest well. Ricotta is approximately 60% protein by calories, about 40% fat. This ratio is favorable for men managing PSA. Research examining men who regularly consumed ricotta versus aged cheese suggests the ricotta group tends to show lower inflammatory markers and better overall metabolic health markers, though individual responses vary. Ricotta is rich in calcium and phosphorus. These minerals are important for overall health. It's also a good source of vitamin A and B vitamins. Ricotta is versatile in cooking. Use it in lasagna. Stuff it in shells or manicotti. Mix it with herbs for a spread. Use it in pancakes or waffles for extra protein. Top toast with ricotta and tomatoes. Mix it into pasta. Use it as a base for dips. Thomas used ricotta instead of aged cheese in his cooking. He made lasagna with ricotta, using fresh mozzarella instead of aged mozzarella. His PSA improved by nearly 1 point over 6 months. Ricotta can typically be included in daily meals for most men, with portions adjusted to individual dietary needs. Typical portions range from 2 to 4 ounces per day, adjusted based on individual nutritional needs and how you're using it in meals. Ricotta provides good nutrition for most people, but individual needs and tolerances vary. Monitor how your body responds and adjust based on your overall dietary pattern. Cheese to eat. Number 4. Feta, cheese, in moderation. Traditional feta made from sheep's or goat's milk. Feta is unique because it's not aged like cheddar or Swiss. It's brined. The brining process is different from aging. It preserves the cheese without the long fermentation that creates compounds associated with inflammation. Feta is lower in fat than aged cheeses. Approximately 60% fat by calories versus 70 to 80% in aged varieties. It's made from sheep's or goat's milk, which research suggests may be easier to digest than cow's milk for some individuals. The milk proteins are structured differently. Sheep and goat milk proteins are structured differently than cow's milk, which some research suggests may be gentler on digestion for certain individuals. Research shows feta has different inflammatory properties than aged cow's milk cheeses. Studies comparing men who used feta on salads versus those who used aged cheddar show the feta group tends to have lower inflammatory markers, though individual responses vary. Feta is very flavorful. A little goes a long way. You can use 1 ounce and get significant flavor impact. This helps with portion control. Feta is excellent on salads, crumbled over roasted vegetables, mixed into omelets, stuffed in chicken or fish, added to grain bowls. The key with feta is moderation. Because it's brined, it's very high in sodium. Excess sodium may contribute to inflammation in some individuals. Given the high sodium content, keeping portions around 1 ounce and enjoying it 3 to 4 times per week rather than daily is a common approach. Paul added feta to his salads instead of blue cheese. 1 ounce, 3 times per week. Combined with other fresh cheeses on other days, his PSA improved. Feta is high in sodium, which may be problematic for individuals with high blood pressure or sodium sensitivity. If you have these conditions, consult your healthcare provider about appropriate feta intake. That's cheese number 4 you can enjoy regularly in moderation. Now let me summarize the complete cheese strategy. Robert ate aged cheddar every day for 30 years, 4 to 6 ounces daily. At 70, his PSA was 8.9. His doctor showed him research on aged versus fresh cheese. Robert switched to fresh mozzarella and cottage cheese. 8 months later, his PSA was 7.6, a drop of 1.3, just from changing the type of cheese. You now know the 4 cheeses research suggests men with elevated PSA may benefit from limiting. aged cheddar, blue cheese, aged Swiss, and aged hard cheeses. All are aged for months or years. All are high in saturated fat. All contain compounds that research suggests may promote inflammation in some individuals. And you know the 4 cheeses you can include in daily meals: fresh mozzarella, cottage cheese, ricotta, and feta in moderation. All are fresh or brined, not aged, lower in saturated fat, provide protein and calcium without the concentrated compounds found in aged varieties. Before making significant changes to your cheese intake, discuss these recommendations with your healthcare provider. They can help you determine which changes are appropriate for your specific health situation, medications, and nutritional needs. Some men may have dietary restrictions or health conditions that affect which cheeses are suitable for them. When you're ready to make changes, review what's in your refrigerator. If you find you're eating aged varieties frequently, discuss with your doctor whether switching to fresh alternatives makes sense for your situation. Your next sandwich, consider fresh mozzarella instead of aged cheese. Your next breakfast, mix cottage cheese into your eggs instead of cheddar. Your next salad, use feta instead of blue cheese. When appropriate for your situation, consider making gradual switches in your cheese choices. Small changes in cheese choice may make a difference in PSA over months. Track your progress with your healthcare provider. Comment cheese below, and I'll send you the complete guide with shopping lists, serving sizes, recipe ideas, and cheese substitution charts. If this video helped you understand cheese choices for PSA management, click like and share with someone who could benefit. Subscribe because my next video covers the 5 dairy mistakes beyond cheese that research suggests may affect PSA levels. You have the power to support your prostate health. It starts with choosing the right types of cheese.